Hi everyone, it's Henry here, and in this video I'm going to be continuing on with my Badab Wars series, where, well, essentially I work through everything that's in the Badab Wars that I really want to do. And for this one we're going to be looking at the Executioners chapter of Space Marines. So for this one there was a few goals. The primary one was to get the blue armour colour right, sort of how I picture it in my head, look at the artwork and stuff and see what I can come up with. But also just to keep playing around with different techniques or different styles and try and refine it down into what I really like at the moment for an upcoming project over the summer in particular. So finish not perfect. This is army painting. This is designed to help us get a great looking army of these guys on the table, get the colours right, get the vibe right of them, and consequently there's a pretty big kit bashing and conversion part at the start of this video. So I hope you enjoy. Let's paint. So I spent a couple of days kit bashing up what I thought was an awesome looking kill team for the Executioners, and I like using kill teams as a template to build to, so it's going to do an Angels of Death one here. And I've had a couple of boxes of the original Space Marines Heroes sets knocking around for ages, and I thought they'd be awesome for Badab because it's the older marks but slightly more modern sculpts. I mean, they're quite old now, but you know, but fairly modern Mark 7 sculpts in the scheme of things. But I made them all up, and the Executioners have these little sort of, I guess, skin loincloth type things, and I didn't really feel, if confidence is the right word, maybe I just couldn't be bothered. I don't know. I wasn't sure about sculpting them. And then out the corner of my eye, I spied the Red Corsairs Raiders box. And every single one of those guys has the loincloth, skin-like loincloth things on them. And I thought, maybe they are a better choice. So, putting those few days of work aside, although to be fair, I still had loads of cool bits that I'd gone through that I thought would give me the right flavour. I thought it was time to start again. And I had always intended to use the Huron Blackheart miniature to create the Executioner's chaplain, Thulsa Kane, from. So actually, having these guys like this is you know, it wasn't an issue. So I had a look, built them up, and yes, the loincloth things look fantastic, but they are obviously, they're covered in all these little trinkets to do with the fact that they are, you know, traitors, rebels, whatever you want to call them, brave freedom fighters. And I was going to have to remove all of that. So what ended up being, you know, maybe less work than sculpting a few loincloths on, I think definitely ended up being a lot more work than just sculpting a few loincloths on, but had a ton of fun in the process, and I really got to know these Raiders kits. So tools-wise, I found these side cutters incredibly useful, along with the more heavy-duty clippers as well. Side cutters give you a really nice, sharp, sort of flat cut, a bit like you would get with a hobby knife, but obviously give you a bit more purchase and everything to do it with. So yeah, clip away. I guess the only tip I can give you here with this is just little bits at a time, just shaving tiny little bits away. You know, if any of you ever do any like woodwork or whittling or anything like that, it's just taking little bits away, and we would get there. And I didn't just want to build these guys as is and paint them Executioners, because I felt like that was, I don't know, why would they have all those trinkets on them as Executioners? Now, Andy had mentioned he picked up this dental tool a while back that he was really enjoying using. It's like those drill pens, but this is, I guess, just a little bit more controllable. I thought, oh, do you know what? Sorry, I'm gonna pick one up and see what's what. Picked up a few of these burr tools to go on the end of it. And oh my goodness, like at this point, it was, you know, the clouds parted, the angels were singing. I was like, I've discovered a new thing for my hobby. This is literally the first time I've ever put it on a model that you can see in this bit of the video. I love it. I think you're going to see me playing around with this a lot in the future. The things it's opened up is huge, in my opinion, for my hobbying. It won't be for everyone, absolutely. And it's not cheap either, you know, so I'm not saying run out and get one of these things, but for the way I like to kit bash and stuff, I love it. I absolutely love it. So I've scraped away the majority of the material with the knife, and then I could go in with this tool to start slowly removing the last few bits of it. I'm going to say this loincloth was the first one. You can see the finish is all a little bit rough. I was sort of getting to grips with it, all the rest of it, but a bit of sanding with some fine sort of 1500 grit sanding sponge, and then the ever faithful Tamiya extra thin just to sort of smooth things out. I think it was absolutely fine. And the fact that it was, meant to be this like tanned flesh or flayed flesh or whatever it is they've got, I didn't think that bit of extra texture really mattered. If this had been a really neat, clean loincloth like on a Marine, like maybe so. Then wanted a Mark 6 shoulder pad, obviously. Haven't built these since the White Scars Army project. Best tip with these is load it up with plastic glue, squidge it together, pull it apart, squidge it back together, and then you can sand off the excess and you get a pretty nice smooth join on there. So the last Angels of Death kill team I did, I included the heavy weapon rather than the sniper rifle. So I thought for this one, I would have the sniper rifle. And I found this one on the new Space Marine Scouts kit. It's got a couple of arms that you can use with the sniper rifle, but obviously they're attached like they are here. So I wanted to figure out where can I trim it off. And this is, so for instance, where the heavier duty clippers, this, using the side cutters there would have dulled the blade and it's just not the right tool for the job. So it might seem excessive having a few different sets of clippers and knives and things like that, but I think if you're going to really get into your kit bashing, it's worth investing in. So, I really like these little Redgrass side cutters. I've got the GW clippers, and then I've got a few different types of knives. The Red Corsairs kit, as I say, I've become pretty familiar with now, and it's fantastic. You've got loads of different marks of armour. There's not obviously too much chaos stuff on it. So there's not too much sort of cleanup you need to be doing with trim and stuff like that. But I would say it's pretty limited in the posing, and I think a bit strange in the posing as well, if I'm honest. Some of them, I don't quite get some of the posing. So I've really enjoyed using it for these executioners. I don't know that I would do like a whole army using it. I think if I was doing a Badab army, I would still look to be using the Heresy, like Mark 2s, Mark 3s, Mark 5s, Mark 6s, Mark 7s, all the rest of it, Mark 7s, you know what I mean? All the different marks. A few little gaps, simple gaps, as in sort of relatively defined areas that I wasn't going to need to have on show. I just used plastic putty to fill them with. I love this. It's an absolutely brilliant gap filling tool. It's really useful for, well, little bits like I've shown you there, but also, sometimes when you'll go to glue an arm on, sometimes you get that little bit of gap on the sort of ribbing. It's really, really good for that. So I wanted to, as I said, I really was keen to make an effort with the kit bashing on these guys. I wanted them to look like loyalist Marines. Now, albeit the executioners, they're pretty violent. They're they're not feral, but they've got that sort of more, I guess, rugged type look to them. But they were still Imperial Space Marines, regardless of the side they were on in the Badab conflict. So I went through, added lots of pouches and purity seals and things like that, calling cards of when you look at them, you think, oh, that's a loyalist Marine. Obviously the loincloth on this guy was pretty full on, so I needed to just completely get rid of it. And then I found one off the Stern Guard kit, and I've just thought, it's a good opportunity to try and see if I sort of blend that in. So I've squidged a bit of that plastic putty in the gap there, and you can see here I'm just using the micro tool, Micromotor or whatever it is. No, it's not Micromotor. Anyway, this little tool thing to help blend that in and just define the bottom edge of that buckle as well. So I was becoming more and more confident with this tool already, only after a couple of uses, and I was saving it up because I knew I was going to use it quite heavily on the Thulsa Kane conversion. I think he counts as a conversion. I think he's a bit more than a kit bash, but anyway, that kind of doesn't bother me, but I know it gets right under Andy's skin, the sort of terminology and usage of things like kit bashing and converting. And then it was just a case of, sort of scuff up his pristine tabard loincloth. Don't know what it is. And all I did here was just kept referencing the ones that were already on the other Red Corsairs and tried to sort of match the style of how it was done. And I actually think it came out pretty nice in the end. And again, this is all, the painting is done with army, painting in mind, and so's the kit bashing. Like, these aren't meant for display. They aren't meant to be absolutely flawless. I want to be careful with them. I want to take care with them. I want to do a good job, but equally, I'm not going to beat myself up if it's not absolutely flawless and perfect. It just looks, as long as it looks good on the shelf and on the table, job's done. A lot of the new Primaris kits are loaded up with purity seals and these trinkets and stuff, so really, really useful for decking them out. And then it was a case of just trimming off anything sort of overtly chaotic sort of calling cards. So again, spikes, which they haven't got loads of, but they got a few. So I just wanted again to clean those off, any of the weapons and things like that, just to really, really sort of drive home the fact that this was these were Imperial Marines. This wasn't me just painting a Red Corsair in whatever colour. And the whole time I was working on this, I was being gazed down upon by the man himself. I felt a little bit guilty about it, but also I felt like there was some sort of delicious, perversion using the Red Corsairs kits to create some executioners with. So Huron was going to be a much bigger prospect to get right. I wanted to do the character Thulsa Kane. He's the High Executioner, so like the chief chaplain of the Executioners chapter. And the way the Angels of Death kill team is done, they actually have a Space Marine captain as the main leader in the thing, which is bonkers, but it's really fun for this idea of using a template to hobby within. So that's what I will run him as for gaming wise. But it gives you the opportunity to make a more special model centerpiece. So yeah, again, he had a lot of pieces to remove, but I didn't want to be lazy. Like, I felt it would be lazy, so is a better way of putting it, if I just did a quick head swap and weapon swap and called it a day. And I'd already been enjoying, the work on the normal Marines, and I thought, great, let's just go to town and enjoy doing him. And so it just took flipping ages, really, but slowly, just methodically working through removing all these things. Why would the High Chaplain have Eldar vials and trinkets and things hanging off his belt? To me, it didn't make any sense at all. So I needed to remove those. And yeah, it wasn't difficult. It was just time consuming. Now Huron does have more of the chaotic trim on him, so I needed to go around and obviously remove the arrows and stuff. But worth it, This is with one of those chisel blade knives I find quite useful for jobs like this, sort of just the angles you're able to get with it. Bit different to what you can get with your normal hobby knife. But it was thoroughly enjoyable, the whole process. It really was. As I say, back to using the plastic putty for sort of simple filling. This stuff's great. Once it dries, you can sand it down. It dries pretty quick, couple of hours. It's good to work with. Obviously, always just check the manufacturer's sort of recommendations. But I enjoy using it, and I always try to get it in this needle nose applicator tube. You can get it in a tube, just like a normal toothpaste type tube. Here we go, another cracking Earthworm Jim sculpt here. His little tongue blemming out. Now, this is probably going to be the most challenging part of the kit bash, was that head area, because he has that big break in his chest and stuff. So I've used their Fafnir Rand's backpack. It's nice and chonky and feels a bit special. And obviously it's Mark II or Mark III, whatever it is. Mark III. Well, it's Artificer, but it's in that style. So that I knew that would help sell the model a bit more as well. The arms, they were going to be pretty simple to replace. So because he's got a brilliant pose, I think the Huron model is excellent. I've really come to like him. But actually removing his arms where they've sculpted the shoulders already on there wasn't tricky to do, and gave us a nice that classic sort of flat surface. Then I picked up some Tamiya putty, and I ordered the wrong one. This was the extra smooth. I think it's called extra fine, extra smooth, something like that. You can see on the box. I hadn't used this one before. I had a box of the other one, the normal, whatever it is, quick drying, the one that sort of goes like a Karamak colour. And I'd used that a couple of times. I was all right with it, and then dried out. So I ordered the new one and accidentally ordered this one. And I thought, well, I've got to get the video done. I've already lost a few days making them out of the old mini Marines. So I thought, wow, sorry, it's just putty. It can't be that different, right? So mixed it up really, really thoroughly. If you're interested in sculpting and stuff, we've got quite a few good sculpting videos over on our Patreon. That Baz did for us a couple of years ago, and Andy is about to, or has said in the last video, he wants to do a series on getting into sculpting as well. So if you are interested in that, consider going and checking that out over on our Patreon. So I was pushing it into place and then just doing some very sort of basic shape forming to begin with before I let it dry. And then my intentions were to effectively chisel it out and see what I could get. So I'd left it, I don't know, about 4 hours, something like that, maybe 5 hours. I did this first thing in the morning, and then I went back to it after lunch. And it's awesome. It is so smooth, so fine, and it carved beautifully, like with a new blade. Like it's just very satisfying. As I mentioned earlier, like if you like whittling and stuff like that, like it's very pleasing. to do. So I sort of tried it out on the thigh plate just to get an idea of what it was like, what I could do. I knew I was going to cover most of this up with things like purity seals and grenades and stuff like that anyway. But I thought, okay, I just need to get a basic shape here and learn what the material is like. And I wanted to use Huron for Thulsa Kane because he's the Baroque armour. So essentially I felt like the Executioners were such a good choice for this kit, and him in particular. He's spoken about having this unique set of war gear, this ancient something's bones, I can't remember, Gledin's bones, something like that. Gredelin's bones, there we go. This artificer armour, I thought that's going to look awesome. But, it was going to take a lot of work, but I think absolutely worth it. So here you can see I've just sort of blending it in to the plastic that's around it, carving those shapes out, and then going in with the 1500 grit, and I think I went in with 2000 grit as well, sanding sponge. Just work away. I keep saying, though, it's not a display model. It's not meant to be. You absolutely, I think, could do this and make it look incredible, but for me, this was more than adequate for what I was trying to achieve with Huron. And then Fafnir Ran. Excuse me. I knew I wanted to use the axe from Fafnir Ran anyway. So the other unique piece of war gear that Thulsa Kane carries is this Life Taker, which is this described as a massive black-bladed power axe of archaic design, carried by successive high executioners of the chapter, and given to Thulsa Kane to signify his command of the executioners. I thought, that's awesome. Where can I get a massive axe from? Fafnir Ran. And obviously, there's wonderful serendipity with it. Given that Fafnir Ran founds the Executioners chapter after the heresy. So yeah, very, very happy with that. I found one of the axe arms from the normal Raiders kit, so I knew it would be sized fairly appropriately. Huron is like really big, even compared to the Raider models, and the Raider models are a little bigger than the Heresy Marines. They're not far off a Primaris. I'll do some scale shots at the end with sort of Guardsmen and Primaris if I remember. The Heresy arms and stuff worked fine on these, but it worked even better with the Raiders arms. They were just that slightly larger. So this was just a case of remove the blade from one, pin it to the other. Here was another lovely moment where the arm here for the plasma pistol fitted perfectly. It had this little pipe, and the torso had a little receiving nodule thing for it. Complete luck, complete fluke, but it was one of those things I was like, oh yeah, this is meant to be, this is going to work. So this is very exciting at this point. I was like, oh my goodness, like I think this is going to look pretty cool and good work. So this was really before the detailing. This was just sort of fleshing out the pose, getting all of that right. And I wanted to put the plasma pistol in his left hand and the axe in his right hand, again, just to move us further away from the Huron silhouette, whereas he's got the axe in the left hand. It's something I like to do if I use a different model as the basis for a kit bash. I try to change that silhouette of it. Sometimes it's as simple as changing the head direction, but this is obviously a bit more involved. He also carries this giant book from the Executioners chapter, and I found the Black Templars upgrade sprues were invaluable, actually, for doing this. They had lots of little sort of relic-y trinkets, and I knew there was always going to be a risk of them looking too Black Templary, but some of the pieces I thought work brilliantly, and in some of the artwork it still shows like Templar crosses and stuff on them, so that felt right. Now the head, I was certain I was going to use that gnarly one with the scar I showed just a second ago, but the more the conversion went on, again I was worried that he would just end up looking like a bit of a badass Marine rather than a chaplain. And I thought I wanted to give him a helmetless head because I think it's cool for characters, right? I think it gives them that little bit extra, but the skull helmet is such a calling card, isn't it, for Space Marine chaplains? It felt sort of wrong not to do it, but I didn't have many, and I didn't like any of the ones I had. I always thought they looked a little bit goofy. And then I found this World Eaters one from the Mark 6 upgrade kit, and it had the teeth in the grill, but not spiky teeth, just sort of put in there. And I thought, oh, awesome! I reckon I can paint a skull on this. It'll look like something anyway. I didn't know if it would look good, but I knew it would certainly look something. So I wanted to give it a try. And there, yeah, just very excited at this point. So with regards to detailing now, there wasn't tons to do. I'd sort of done a lot of that sculpting on around his neck and all of that. But I did want to add some sort of bonding studs onto the armour. It's just a look I really like on Marines, and some rivets and things like that. So I grabbed my stamping foil, which is this foil you can see me using here. Sometimes it's brass, sometimes it's silver like this, but it's just called stamping foil. You can buy it in sheets. Then I've got a little silicone pad underneath, and then I've just got a load of tiny drill bits that I use to punch through. Be careful when you do that. The amount of times I've spiked my fingers is pretty high. In fact, you will see throughout this video at various times I've got plasters and things all over. So I apologise if you've got, look at my gnarly old digits. And then, just apply them. The smaller ones, plastic glue is absolutely fine, bonds them on, holds them absolutely fine. But the larger ones, I find a little dot of super glue does help. But again, this was just all to take it further from the original model. On Chaos Marines, typically their bonding studs are spiked. So again, having rounding ones would help us out to differentiate it from. Just all to I've removed so much detail from the Mini, I need to add some of that detail back in. Otherwise, I think it would end up just looking a bit odd. But I was very, very happy actually with the way it came together. And it did take a while. Now, I had originally envisaged doing this video as one video on Thulsa Kane, and then I was going to do one video on the kill team. But I wasn't sure either of those were quite interesting enough to do. As it turns out, I think this is a bit too much for one video. Let me know in the comments what you think. But that's why it's took a little bit longer to get out. So I'm still finding my feet with what's the perfect projects to do for these these fortnightly videos. So just bear with me on that one. But we'll find the happy middle ground with it. But there you can see he's together. The axe starts drooping. I go back and fix that. Put a longer pin in there in the end. But I think he's come out really cool. To me, he's his own model now. He's his own character, and I don't think anything I have done is particularly skillful or particularly difficult. It's a little bit nerve-wracking, I think. I bought all of these kits. None of this has been given us or anything like. But just get going, just get chopping and have fun, right? The modern kits are a ton of fun to work with, and I've got to say, this Raiders kit, as expensive as it is a pretty sweet kit. This guy obviously had the most sort of work done on him. Because of that loincloth and stuff, but I still think he came out really, really nicely. And I've tried, I've gone through, pardon me, the various entries for the Angels of Death guys, operatives, and tried to make it obvious, which ones they are and what I'm using. I really love this guy. This guy's nearly all the Red Corsairs kit, actually. Just a handful of Mark II bits on him. Really, really cool. And one thing I haven't bothered listing in this is all the little trinkets. So like the grenade pouches, the purity seals, things like that. Those are just in loads of different Marine kits. So I'm not going to, like list those individually. That's your bits box. But yeah, everything else here was good. And this guy was pretty involved as well. I'm really happy with how he came out. Actually, you'll notice I changed the head position, didn't I? Not sure which one I prefer now, actually. But I really loved the left arm, like, kind of looked like, I don't know, actiony or whatever. I don't know. Just think this guy looks like a bit of a badass. And I had to do him, and I wanted to do the sniper so that I could do that awful, awful old camouflage scheme for completeness sake. But yeah, I think he came out pretty cool. Let me know which you like, if any, in the comments. I'm very pleased with sort of how that characters have come out. This guy had one of the stranger poses. I don't know, some of the posing on the base models, I find it with some of the Primera stuff as well, it almost like they're doing like the zombie dance out of Thriller sometimes. It's got that almost awkward look, but then other times super dynamic and really cool. But I don't know whether it's just me seeing that. I'm sure it can't just be me seeing that. But yeah, and I tried, because I wanted these guys to represent sort of Sternguard, veterans of the chapter. I tried to make sure they had the extra bits on them, so maybe they had extra bionics and extra, trophies and stuff like that. This guy came out pretty cool. That's just the standard chain axe from the Mark II Assault Marines for Heresy. They're ludicrous. They're absolutely gigantic, but they look really cool. Gave this lad a Deathwatch shoulder pad as well. Again, just to further reinforce this is a 40k era Space Marine, which I thought worked actually pretty well with him, and lovely to get a new old Mark III backpack in this kit as well that you can see there. I've used an old Mark III shoulder pad. I would say actually the shoulder pad's the only thing in the kits that I felt didn't work because they were, I felt, more overtly meant for chaos, not spiky, but kind of meant for the chaos stuff. But anyway, a rather long and rambly and detailed kit bashing section. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you understand why I spent the time here trying to get them to look like the Marines I had in my head. But now we can paint them. Okay, on to the armour, and I'll just apologise. I've still got this perpetual cold thing at the minute, so I'm really sorry if the audio's not quite as good as normal on this. So we've got lots of art references for the Executioners. Just the primary one for me is the Badab books from Imperial Armour from Forge World from years ago. But I've recently discovered this artist, Dark Mechanic. Really fantastic. I really like his take, and he's done a load of Badab Marines, like, fan art for them. So I sort of had these two quite disparate, I think, styles, and I guess wanted to try and marry them a bit and make sort of something that I liked from it. And I often find, and then if you look at the modern 40k like Primaris Executioner scheme, that's different again. It's got a few more bronze elements, which actually I quite like. So this was very much just making my interpretation of the Executioners. Now I wanted, as I said, to make them veterans for this kill team, and also be like the Honour Guard, I guess, for Thulsa Kane. And in the artwork, the veterans, they talk about them having the yellow shoulder pads, so I decided to lean into that. Now, I knew there was going to be a real risk of, a blue-grey, yellow shoulder pads looking a bit Space Wolfy, so tried to steer away from that. You can see here I'm airbrushing on a nice red-brown. It's one of our upcoming mini-colour paints, and I'm using the new Harder and Steenbeck Cult of Paint Edition Evolution, which are available now. Link down in the description. Love this brush. Yours will come looking an awful lot cleaner, and hopefully you maintain yours a bit nicer on the outside. I promise internally it's absolutely spotless. Outside, it's absolutely filthy. And this is, I guess, just where all the experimenting begins and continues, and I'll talk about it a little bit at the end, how successful that was. But I decided to sort of sponge on the first highlight anyway, for the shoulder pads. I thought just to try and get a bit of, texture or something, interest onto the model, just so it didn't look too smooth with all the airbrushing. So I just used a light yellow there, like an icy yellow colour, sponged that on generally where the light would be, and then I've gone back in with white through my airbrush just to intensify the areas of highlight on them. And I'm doing them on the blue tacked onto the Marine just so that I can get the light direction correct for it. I tried all the different contrast yellows, and in the end I felt that Nazdrag yellow gave me the sort of the warmth and the tone of yellow that I wanted for these guys. Again, I was keen for it not to look too Space Wolfy, and in my head this is a bit too sort of dark and rich for a Space Wolf yellow. Really liked the colour itself. I like all the contrast yellows, to be honest. I think they're probably my favourite contrast paints. Any yellow scheme I do, this is where I tend to start, is with the contrast yellow over a pre-shade. And then if I don't get what I want, then I'll move on to other paints. So once I've done the shoulder pads, then it was ping them off, keep them safe, keep them numbered as it were, so I knew which one was left, which one was right, which one went on various Marines, something worth bearing in mind. And then gave the models a black base coat, and I've used a slightly glossy black there. It's it's not gloss, satin black, because I was going to do metals over it, and metals tend to look nicer over a shinier black. You just get a bit better shine from them. So loaded up black metal from scale 75. This is the newish or the current iteration of black metal, which is quite blue. And actually, when you see me spray it on, it goes on and I'm like, oh, there we go, there's the colour done. Bomb, the armour colour, finished. And you probably could just get away with that if you really wanted to. I wanted to try and get a little bit more nuance into the scheme. And actually, when it dries, it's not quite as blue. It's a beautiful colour, I think, anyway. But yeah, so I was like, I can't just spray it like that, can I? No. Sub-assemblies, it varied marine to marine, but it was all about access. So if I needed, if it was across their chest, I would blue tack the arms in. If there was a lot of detail on the back and the waist I wanted to get to, I would blue tack the backpack on. Just whatever would give you better access. And I generally only do the sub assemblies as far as I have to. Like as soon as I've achieved the part that I needed better access to or whatever, or different colour, I tend to glue them together and try to paint the model as a whole wherever possible. And that's simply because I really don't like handling painted bits. I find them a bit heavy handed sometimes, and I'll end up rubbing a bit of paint off or something, and it really frustrates me, or gluing a wrong bit on or whatever. Then for the highlights, I've gone for Duraluminium here, a nice neutral bright silver by Vallejo Metal Colour series. Works lovely in the airbrush. All the airbrush I'm spraying at 20, maybe 25 psi. I'm using a 0.4mm needle and nozzle. And then I'm just thinning the paint accordingly to get it to go through and come out how I want it to. So there's no golden ratio or anything. You need to play around depending on what your setup is. But that's my setup right now, April in the UK, is what I'm using. And as you see me pointing there on the Mini, I've tried to go for sort of a directional highlight. It's not just a straight zenith or down from the top. I've tried to pick where's the cool angle to highlight things from and come in from that. So again, with him, as I was pointing there, it felt like there was an obvious, okay, highlight the inside of this leg, highlight this bit of the chest, it'll look cooler that way. And where I say look cooler is normally it means that you can have some nice sort of dramatic direction changes, which gives you a little bit more light and dark contrast. Value contrast, so it looks kind of cool. But you can see the difference there between the highlight guy on the left and the guy on the right who's just had the base coat of the black metal. Metallic schemes for me, still just like maximum bang for your buck gaming stuff. I think metallics look brilliant on the table. They look less good on camera. So if you're someone who generally hobbies like that and enjoys showing your work off, online or photos to friends rather than in person, it's not quite as nuanced. It's not quite as easy to take nice photos of them. But for me, like, stick them on the table. They look awesome. So here was something else I wanted to try out, which was essentially doing my recess washing at this step before I put the colour on. And again, this is all just because I painted that Cathay stuff in a slightly different way, and I was trying little bits of it out on here. And one of the things I did on the Cathay was a lot of black lining. And I thought, I wonder if I can do black lining now rather than later on. So here I've got a little metal mixing dish. If you just search metal mixing dish for paint, you find these everywhere. I'm using an oil. You see I popped it on a piece of kitchen towel there just for a minute or two, just to wick off sort of a little bit of the excess oil, because that will help the oil, all that stuff evaporate off quicker when we mix it in with the thinners here. The oil paint doesn't dry quicker, doesn't cure quicker by doing it like that, but it certainly dries enough for what we're using it for here. And we can carry on painting over it. So you can see me mixing up there with just normal DIY shop white spirits, which again evaporate quickly, so it's quote unquote drying quicker. I'm speaking like this because it can upset people sometimes when we talk about oil paints drying, when actually we mean oil paints curing. But equally, like, whenever you see me paint and stuff, I'll tell you how long stuff's been on there. There's no tricks, there's no like faking it behind the scenes kind of thing. What you see is what you get with it. Oils really are not as scary as many people make out. So I haven't varnished the model or anything like that. I don't need to. My metallic paint here is completely dry, so there's not going to be any chemical interaction between the white spirits or the oil paints and those acrylic paints that are already on there. And because the metallic paint has a glossy finish, there is quite a low surface tension on this miniature already, and that means that, coupled with the mineral spirits, which obviously have the low surface tension, you will get this capillary action where the paint just gets sucked into all the recesses and generally just doesn't stay on any of the surfaces, doesn't bleed out on any of the surfaces, which is lovely. So for me, I used an old synthetic brush to mix it together, and here I'm using an older natural hair brush because it's got a nice point to place the paint. I'm not doing that reductive technique where you just slap the oil all over and then remove it all later. I'm trying to be more deliberate with where I'm placing it at this stage. Eventually that natural hair brush will be no good because the mineral spirits will dry it out. But it's fine for like ages, months, if not years. You'll still get away with using them. I don't do anything special with mine. Once they go in the oil pile, they just get used with the oil paints, washed with a bit of white spirits at the end, and then stuck back in stuck back in a pot, and they're fine. I don't find there's an issue. One thing you do want to do before you start putting any white spirits though on the model is remove any of the blue tack. because when it mixes with the white spirit, it goes into this horrible sticky mess, stringy sticky mess. Not a good idea. Once that had been on the model for 2 hours, maybe, tops, something like that, I'm going back in here and I'm just using a little sponge. You can see a little makeup sponge, a little bit of white spirit on there, squeeze out the excess, and I'm just going to use this to very gently remove any of the oil where I don't want it to be. So yeah, I think this is probably 2 hours at most. It is evaporated and dried absolutely plenty for what we're going to try and do on the model. So just patience, or slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Just work around the model, find all those little bits so it doesn't look too messy. And, if we were doing Iron Warriors, we could probably stop at this stage. Although maybe not Iron Warriors. Not dingy enough for Iron Warriors, is it? Grey Knights this could work quite nice for. It's got that slight blue tint to it still, hasn't it? And thankfully, I did remember and spot the big splodge on his bum. And actually, that was just before I was about to paint him. I noticed that one. It's funny, isn't it? You think you're concentrating and doing it, and then you'll miss glaringly obvious bits. And then the armour. The armour colour for me was the most important thing in this whole project. And it was, to be honest with you, it was the only thing in my head before I started I was pretty certain of that would work. I did some test schemes, but not particularly elaborate. I should have done more, but we'll talk about that at the end. But I thought to myself, I know there's a blue-grey in the contrast range that might work for this. I couldn't remember if it was Griff Charger Grey or the Space Force Grey. Space Force Grey, much too light, much too blue. Griff Charger, I think, is absolutely perfect. So I've thinned it 1-to-1 with normal airbrush thinner. And then I am doing one coat at a time and letting it dry. And I just did it on one marine to get it to the level I wanted before then repeating it on the rest. I think it's vital if you're going to do a technique like this where essentially you're sort of glazing over a colour at the end. If you want it to be consistent, maybe you don't, but if you want it to be consistent across your army, you need to take a note of the exact dilution you're using and the exact number of coats that you're applying, and you need to be disciplined with how you're applying those coats as well. The temptation will be there to spray on the coat a little bit thicker because it's impatient. You want to get that colour there. But contrast paint dries more dull, but also far more, the word has now escaped me, far more opaque than initially it looks when it goes on. So you can see on the left, he's had one coat, barely changed it. But even in the sort of minute or so I'm waiting to do the next coat, it's getting that little bit darker. It's getting that bit more in there. But I hope you'll agree, I think it's the right colour. I've seen lots of excellent interpretations of Executioners. But for me, like a 3-stage, 4, I guess if you count the pin washing, a 4-stage thing to get the right colour for the army, I think is mega. I think that's very doable and easy to replicate en masse, which is, again, is the goal. With this. So you see the difference that second coat's made already, far more intense. And hopefully you can see the difference that sort of pre-shade with the metals and the shading with the black has made to it as well, rather than us just going with that sprayed on dark blue silver that we used at the start. Now, I felt I had to do this guy. So this is from sort of Rogue Trader era, so very early 40k. Might have been just into 2nd edition. Anyway, one of the books there was a Space Marine Compendium book, I think it was. It had loads of the Badab chapters in there. And at that time, Marines had lots of camo. And I can only assume the camo is kind of meant to be like Dazzle Cam, right? Because these guys are like 9 foot tall walking tanks. But I thought I have to do homage to the camo for completeness, for my own sake. I think it looks awful. But objectively, I actually think it came out quite well. Subjectively, it's just not my cup of tea. But I was really pleased to put him in the squad. And as I said earlier, I feel like making him the sniper worked nicely. I picked Corvus Black in the end as the colour. I say, obviously, this colour is my interpretation of the Executioners. I didn't want to fully try and copy that really old piece of art. But I felt this was good. This was certainly good enough as a nod to that. So I sort of looked at the patterns on there. They were a little bit more rounded than I've gone for on these. I've still kept these fairly rounded, but I just had a few different pictures of camouflage up on the computer while I was painting. I asked our commissions chief, Ben, about it. He loves his historical stuff and all that, and he said it was kind of a P-dot camo, the one they put on there, but also kind of just made up. So that gave me a sort of bit more confidence. You know, I don't like getting things wrong when I'm ignorant about them, but it seemed like this camo was just sort of made up. So yeah, just did large wiggly shapes all over. Didn't highlight anything like that. It was just 2 coats of slightly thinned down Corvus black, and then started doing these little groups of dots. And it looked to me like they were little groups of 3 dots and little groups of 2 dots. And they often crossed over where the dark and the light armour was. So all I did was work around the whole model. I would do a group of 3, then I'd do 2, then a group of 3, group of 2. And actually by this stage, I really enjoyed it. I thought it looked great. Camo's such a difficult one, I find, on miniatures, because if you paint it effectively, the mini's probably going to look awful on the table, I think. So it's a real tough one. But because he's this massive, great Space Marine, and because this camouflage was quite stylistic, I actually think it looks not bad. I've gone right the way around the houses with this guy, from loathing him to going, I'm going to do a whole army like this, back to sort of ambivalence, I guess, with him. Then for Thulsa Kane, so the chaplain for the black armour, I did the shoulder pad first. I wanted to avoid putting any yellow on Thulsa Kane. It's for the veterans. He doesn't need to show that he's the veteran in that sense, right? He's the chief chaplain. And also, I thought I wanted to stay away from any of that Imperial Fist / Black Templar / Space Wolf look, if I could. And I thought actually by not including the yellow on here, that would help with that. So we've just used, say, just on the blue shoulder pad for him there. And then for the black armour itself, again, I'm still playing around with these P3 paints at the minute, really enjoying them. So just took a couple of greys that I fancied, like slightly blue greys, and went with it. Looking at the mini here under the lamp, I can sort of see the areas I want to highlight on him. So I'm just going in and using those as my guide. I've thinned the paint here. This is definitely on the more dilute side. This paint in particular, I think I probably thinned 2 drops of thinner to 1 drop of paint. And I'm going in and putting the areas of highlight. I'm trying to be accurate, but I'm also not worrying if I go a bit overboard here, because I'm going to go back and clean them up a little bit later with some black and narrow them down and shape them just how I want them to be. But just trying to follow the shapes, on the model. I think his right shin came out really nicely, actually. And now I'm just mixing in a light blue grey here. I'm not going to ever try and replicate this, so I didn't worry about ratios and stuff, just lightened it up a bit. You can see here on the top of the mixing pot sort of how thin the mix is. I do like painting black. I worry we do it a bit too much on the channel, so I always feel obliged to try and do a different recipe every time or a different approach every time. But I do think this came out pretty nice, actually. So now I'm going back in with the black itself, and you'll notice I've used a more matte black here for his armour colour. And here I'm just spraying into the areas of shadow and then getting a little and using that little bit of overspray to help reduce the areas of highlight and just reshape them. I've tried to leave in the armour in sort of real-time painting. The rest of the video, a lot of it will be sped up at parts because it's just kind of recipes. But I thought it was worth leaving in how I've approached the armour in real time. If that's useful, please let me know. If not, I can always condense it. This video is long. I think this video is over an hour, which is longer than I want them to be. But it's also nice for them to be thorough, I guess. So yeah, you guys guide me on that. You let me know what's more enjoyable. And that little area in there, I think, is just a touch too broad still, that highlight, but I'll go in with a brush later and neaten that up. And then it was going to be time for the decals. So I've given the model a few coats of polyurethane gloss varnish here. I really like the Vallejo polyurethane gloss. It's nice and robust. You do need to let it dry. So I thin it. It's probably slightly more than 50-50. It's probably closer to 2:1, 3:1 thinner to varnish, just to get it go through the airbrush at the same rate that I do with my other paints. And I probably put on 5 coats of it. So generally with this, I will do a thin coat, put the model to the side, do the next model, do the next model, do the next model. Then I'll pick the first model up, blast it with a hairdryer, and do another coat. And then I will leave that for a good few hours. Ideally, leave it overnight. And then that gloss varnish is really nice and set, and it's a lovely surface to work from. And you haven't got any concerns then of any of the solvents we're going to be using for our decals damaging your paintwork in any way. Once your decals are on, I've given all the models a coat of matte varnish, and I've deliberately gone for a matte varnish so it's not ultra matte, so that it still retains a little bit of shine from the armour. So I tried a satin one out, that was too glossy, and this Ammo Mig Lucky Matte was just the right sort of satin finish for me. And the decals, I just searched on eBay for some Executioners decals, if you are wondering. Now, one thing, I had layered a few of the decals up, and some of them I hadn't laid up either, but I had stuck the shoulder pads on some blue tack whilst I did some of the trim, and when I peeled them off the blue tack, they pulled off a load of the decal. So I'm not sure whether this was user error on my part. I'm not sure whether there was an issue with any of the products. Not the end of the world, but just something to be conscious of. Maybe don't press your decals into blue tack until they are well and truly dried. Now let's look at the metals. So with the metals, there was I guess one that I wanted to get right, which was the sort of bronze colour that we see in the colour plates and on the modern interpretation of the Executioner scheme. And I really liked it. I thought it was very nice. So I played around with a few different mixes, a few different metallics, and this is the one I settled on liking. So I have mixed the metallic paint in with a normal matte paint here, a nice dark chocolatey brown. It's chocolate by Mini Colour, but something like Rhinox Hide would work well for this. As the base coat, and then for the highlight I've ended up using Sycorax bronze here. I really like it. It's a lovely pale sort of bronze look. I think in the end it's different to how I've done bronzes in the past as well. Actually really enjoyed working with this. Generally with the GW metallics, I find the lids that have the pots that have a white lid are all really fantastic, and it's more of a mixed bag with the metals that don't have the white lid. So obviously the way in which they're produced, I don't know the exact thing there, but these ones I enjoyed working with. And then just to add a little bit of richness to the shadows, I've done slightly diluted Garagax Sewer here, contrast paint, so it's more like a wash. And you see as I'm applying it, I'm pushing the paint and ending the stroke in the recesses and in the shadows, so that's where the majority of the paint will sit. And then I think when it was dried, I think I did go back in and just do a little re-highlight with the Sycorax bronze. But I really like this. This has gone in the recipe book for future use. Actually think it might look pretty good on Minotaurs, speaking of Badab. So the silver, I went for Exhaust Manifold here, a slightly dirty silver. Looks like brown silver, very similar to something like Iron Warriors by Games Workshop. The reason I've used Exhaust Manifold by Metal Colour Series is it flows very nicely. So for doing details like the shoulder pads and trim and stuff like that, I find it's just a nicer paint to use because of those properties. Colour-wise, I say it's very similar to something like Armour as a dirty, sort of slightly brown silver we've gone for. And again, this was my interpretation of it. There is silver trim on different areas in some of the artwork. Now, I used a fresh pot of Rattling Grime. I had just run out, and that's what I usually do over my silvers, you'll know. But I got a very strange reaction or finish or something where I had all these sort of white deposits, and I don't know if this is the new mix. I don't know. Please tell me if that's what Rattling Grime is like now. I've only just run out of my original run of Rattling Grime, but that was quite frustrating. I came back in the morning and I was like, oh, this looks rubbish. So I ended up using an enamel wash in the end, which was quite nice because I haven't used it for ages and I do really like the effect it's given me. But just a little frustrated. As I say, I was sort of, in my head, I was trying to keep it sort of fairly simple, fairly acrylic, this kind of thing. So it's a bit annoying. And on that note, like I'm coming to the end of quite a few of my paints at the moment, so I've been replacing them. And I picked up a new Thondia Brown. So again, the Thondia Brown on the left I got a few years ago, and the Thondia Brown on the right I've just bought. And as you can see there, it's quite a different colour. So this is where, and paint will change over time. There is no getting away from it. The raw materials change, things happen. I understand that. I think communication's important if it's going to change dramatically. But what I would say is, if you have got a paint that you really like and you do a test scheme, go and buy a couple of pots of that paint for an army, just so that you'll have that consistency across the army. Worth sort of doing. And that's it for the metals. Just very, very, very simple. Then it was on to the fleshy, clothy, I guess, loincloths. Yeah, we'll call them loincloths for now. Again, back into the P3s. Just enjoying using them at the minute. To be honest, I got the whole set, so I've just been working through. And here I sort of went back to that more scratchy, sort of loose style of painting. You may have noticed in the video, and we'll talk about it a bit more at the end, a slight lack of direction with these guys, which ended up being quite frustrating. But you know, is what it is. So I've taken the dark colour, really, really thinned it down, as you can see here, and then I'm just using lots and lots of scratches to build up the layers of paint on the model. And I did this to give it that sort of horrible tanned flesh leather sort of look. I think it came out really nice. This is the way I enjoy painting. So unsurprisingly, this was probably my favourite part of doing the paint job. But also, it was a real lovely vindication of that time spent cleaning up these cloths, so they weren't covered in all the Red Corsairs stuff. As I say, I felt for the video, just doing head swaps and arm swaps wasn't enough. I wanted to do a bit more. I wanted to make them a bit more special for me. And I think the effort was worth it. Should I have put maybe 10% more effort in getting them super clean, and then maybe 100% more effort in with the painting? I think that could look pretty special. But the realization that we got at the end of the models, you know, I still think looks pretty rad. So I just built up those two flesh colours, and then in the end, I've just grabbed a little bit of red that was on my palette. This might have been my red acrylic paint. This might have been a bit of contrast paint. I can't remember, but it was just a bit of red on the palette. I thinned it right out with water, and I've just sort of glazed it in a little bit just to make it a bit more gross. Just add a little bit more colour into the scheme. I always enjoy on these videos just trying different stuff out, right? It's almost just me documenting, trying different recipes and different approaches out to painting different elements of models. And it's all basically with this view to building up this huge repository for when I do finally sit down and start doing Project 20, which is, you know, sort of the last 20 projects of my hobby career, for want of a better term. I've sort of got that, you know, repository there, and I can just crack on and know exactly, you know, what I want to do and where I want to draw the various techniques and looks and things from. So yeah, I think it's just good fun, right, to try out, or I enjoy trying out new things anyway. For it. So for the lenses, you see I've got a couple of contrast paints and a couple of normal acrylics. So to start off with, I'm just using a white acrylic here to fill in the whole of the lens, including the recess around it. And then I'm going to put contrast paint, the darker contrast paint over it, so flesh terrors in this case. Now, the reason I've done that is I want the recesses around the lens to have a nice white base in them, so that the paint we put over the top will be nice and powerful, rather than just over black, where it will go really, really dull. Once that's done, I'm going to go back in, and this time I'm just whiting out the actual raised part of the lens itself, so the shaped part of the lens itself. And this is because we're going to put another contrast paint over that, but we want that to be brighter on the areas that we want brightest. So here we're going for the Bile Red, I think it was. Are we? I think we are. Yeah, we are. Yeah, it's just the difference. And I had a few goes with this sort of on a marine head just to see what worked. And I think this resulted in the nicest sort of red lens. Now, I think you could probably just leave it there, and it looks great. And if you really wanted to keep your army painting efficient, and you don't like painting lenses, this was great fun. I guess the white on just the raised part of the lens was a little bit tricky, like brush control wise, but certainly not the end of the world difficult. But now I'm going in, and with black, I'm just underlining the area at the bottom of the curved part of the lens before the recess. And this was tricky on camera because as I'm filming, the model's really quite far away from me. So doing detailed bits like this is quite tricky. But actually came out pretty good on this one. So this again, just to add some definition into the lenses. I haven't really painted the rest of the model particularly well, I don't think, or particularly, well's not the right word, particularly involved way. But I wanted to spend a little bit more time on the lenses, partly because I enjoy it, And also I think there's definitely value in, when you do a more simple paint job on a Mini, having certain areas where you've had the time and care. I think it really helps elevate, sort of becomes greater than the sum of its parts kind of thing. And here I'm just using an orange. This is Papaya, I think, from Mini Colour, but you could use something like Fire Dragon Bright from GW, just to do a sort of bright highlight in the middle of the lens. So we're not doing the white dots in the corner, we're not doing anything like that. It bugged me. I'd done too thick of a black line on that lens, so I decided to go back in, white it out and repeat the process. And that then made me think, oh, well, why not just do the black line after you've done the white step, before you apply that second red colour, because obviously the black will still shine through from under the contrast paint, no problem. Shine through is the wrong term, but you know what I mean, show through. So I tried that out on the next one, and yeah, and the reason is then I've only got to, if I do mess the line up, I've only got to go back and do the white step rather than go back and do 2 stages. So that's how I would do these again, and that's how I did the rest of the squad. And the whole squad took less time to do than filming one head, because I could hold it close to my face and see what I was doing. So yeah, yes, it takes brush control, but I think it was worth it, and a nice result in the end. Not sure I'll use it again, but I think a nice result in the end. I've included how I've done it just for completeness. So rather than someone asking and me going, "I'll go and look at this video," like you can just see how I've done it here. But this is very, very simple basing. I'm using a texture paste, in this case Dark Earth, from AK. The texture pastes generally are also an adhesive, so if you want to add tufts and things, you can do that at this stage and use them as the glue, essentially. I'm going to add a little bit of sort of rubble and stuff on top, just to get a bit of interest on there. But this is all super sped up, as you can tell, because it's so simple, it's almost not worth including. Then a couple of pigments, as you see here, light sienna and a sort of dark brown colour. I've left that overnight, smoosh it on, it's nice and dry, and then just work this into the base, really grind it in, as it were, and that will be absolutely fine. This is how a lot of my bases, actually how a lot of Andy's bases and Ben's bases are as well for our armies, because we like the look. It's perfectly robust without any fixed stiff on, as long as you've worked it right in. If you store your minis in foam cases, you might find you get a bit of it over the models, but generally if you're using magnets and things like that, it's absolutely fine. And then there's really not much left to do on them. I'm not a huge fan of sculpted effects. I think they're done very well on the whole, particularly by GW. I think Steamforged do a pretty nice job of them on the War Machine stuff. Malifaux, I think, have got some nice ones. Like, it's not that I don't care for the thing, it's just it's not my cup of tea generally. But it's on here on this grenade, so I thought it'd be good to learn how to make it look okay. And in the end I thought, I wonder if a sponge will work. So I grabbed the makeup sponge, based it dark grey, and then I just started loading up successively lighter greys on the sponge and worked those more and more in towards the smoke that was the furthest away from the grenade. And I actually think it's quite nice. It's quite sort of gentle, it's quite soft, it's quite, I think it's pretty nice actually. And who knows, maybe I'm coming around to smoke effects. Like, it's definitely going through a bit of a transition phase, I think, with my hobby at the minute. Tastes are changing. I'm looking at historicals more. I think this is just getting old. But also just, I guess trying to embrace and enjoy the new take on miniatures rather than resenting it and pining for the old stuff and then treating the old stuff for what it was as well. I don't know. If you want to listen to that sort of rambling, come and check us out on Twitch and the podcast and stuff over on Culture of Paint. We'll often have discussions around that sort of thing. But yeah, I think it came out pretty nice actually in the end. And then the black armor I felt needed just a little bit more. I really didn't want to do edge highlighting on the minis, but I felt that this armour needed just a little bit. The black armour needed just a little bit. So I've just gone for a light grey, and I've just picked out the edges, some of the edges on the areas of brightest highlight on the model. So I haven't gone around all of them by any means. I haven't even gone around most of them. It's just those brightest areas of highlight I've gone in and just added a couple. So it just took a minute or two to do. And actually I do think it was worthwhile. I have got incredibly light touch on the battle damage on these minis, almost non-existent. All I've done is done a tiny bit of scratching on some of the decals. Where they'd peeled off with that mistake I made earlier, I just decided to lean into that and go, okay, well, that's chipped off, whatever. But obviously on the chaplain here, they didn't. So I've just gone in with some black paint and just chipped a little bit of them just for that consistency across the minis. This, I think, was the biggest part of the paint job that I realised. And not only do I enjoy the look when it's battle damaged, I enjoy the process. But I wanted to try and leave it off the model just to see, see if that was how I felt or whether that was just how I assumed I felt about it. And then, yeah, the skull face on his helmet. A bit nerve-wracking, but in the end, super simple. Only took a couple of minutes. Grabbed my normal sort of bone colours, so a nice kind of raw umber brown, sort of dark, almost green brown. And then I've built it up with tans, so colours like Deathcore Drab or Karak Stone, things like that. I've used some mini colours here, but it really doesn't matter. You're just looking for those sorts of colours. And I'm just stippling and scratching it in, so it looks like it's painted onto his faceplate. I thought it would look quite cool. And then obviously you have the slightly more sculpted teeth element, which is nice. But I thought painting on the rest would look pretty cool. I think this helmet looks flipping great. I will be using this on models in the future for sure, and doing a nicer paint job on them for sure, because I think it's worth it. I know this effect works obviously with Night Lords. This is how they do it. So obviously I was a little bit nervous. It ended up looking a bit Night Lordsy, but I don't. I think it looks like an Imperial Chaplain. I think it looks like an Imperial Chaplain, albeit from a slightly feral chapter, which I think is perfect, right, for the Executioners. Really, really pleased with how it's a funny old set of models. There's certain parts that I am like 10 out of 10 happy with what happened, but the overall feeling is not as perhaps as strong as I had hoped, of positivity, and yeah, just taking a little bit of time and building it up. Nothing on the model was really rushed. Nothing on the model was particularly difficult. Very cool sculpt though. And then lastly was Life Taker, was his axe. So it just described it as a dark black bladed power axe, and I thought, well, I need to do a little bit of highlighting on it. So I chose to use like a blue or blue-green to highlight the black with, just so it was different to the armour. So I've highlighted the armour with a colder, a more neutral grey, whereas this is obviously very much a green to highlight it up with. And here that's just basically edge highlighting. Again, just trying to be neat and tidy, sort of edge highlighting. Went a bit too bright with this highlight, so once it was on there, I just went back in with the coal black, thinned down, and glazed that over it, just to knock it back a little bit. I'm not often tempted to go back to minis when I finish them. This one, I don't know. I'm really pleased with the Kitbash, so there may be a temptation in the future to go back and do a nicer paint job. I mean, it's why I feel, would it have been better to have done him just on his own for his own video? I'm not sure. I'm just not sure that would have been an interesting enough video on its own. But including him within this and painting him in the same way as the rest of the squad, yeah, I'm not sure. Glad I did it though. And then a tiny bit of weathering. I've just gone for, again, a sort of raw umber colour here, just around the feet of the model. Again, an oil wash, no varnishing necessary as long as everything's dry before you put it on, just to help blend them into the bases a little bit more. You can see here, I did these actually the night before, so I put the basing material on, and then before I did the powders, I just did the oil wash as well. So it had, both of them had time to really thoroughly dry overnight before I went in with the powders. So here they are, all done and together. My latest Angels of Death kill team into the kill team cabinet, which is onto its second shelf now, which is quite exciting. I've got one more planned for this year, but I'm sure a couple more will appear as well as and when the inspiration strikes. And importantly as well, the Badab thing continues. I guess it's just a bit of a personal passion project. I would really love to have in my cabinet an interpretation of every chapter from the Badab Wars, and then any of the characters and sort of weird special units that we got in them. I would love to do that, and I've been doing it sort of sporadically over the last few years, and I'm just trying to ramp it up a little bit, partly because I'm involved in a Badab campaign at the moment, but also, as you've noticed the last few months, the channel changes. I want to start doing more of this type of project, and I hope you guys sort of enjoy seeing it. But you can see them next to some of the other Badab Marines, and for me, the style I've done on the Raptor, the style I've done on the Nova Marine, that's how I like my Marines to look at the moment. I'm really, really glad I tried this out on the Executioners, and I say objectively, I think they look really decent. I think an army of them would look fantastic, and already on the shelf when I glance over from my seat, they jump out more than the other ones do. But I think for that personal taste thing, I just like that Nova Marine a little bit more. And as I say, I've got a Marine project coming up over the summer that I want to do, and I think I will be leaning more into that style with them. But yeah, like the models themselves, as I say, the Raiders kit was a lot of fun to work with. I think it is ideal for a kill team. I've spoken last on the Cathay video about using things like kill teams and Mordheim warbands and Necromunda gangs, things like that, as a framework and a template to do your hobby with. Gaming is irrelevant in this case, it doesn't matter, but what you got is a little bit of context for this group of minis to go together, and just that little sort of guidance of, okay, I need to make a sniper, or you can't have both, got to have a sniper or a heavy weapon. Okay, I need one character. It's been nice to have that little bit of sort of direction to do with them. But yes, trying out these different styles, and I think some of the approaches I took on these guys was stuff I'd done from the Cathay video, a little bit neater, not as much weathering, things like that, and I think it was perfect for the Cathay. I couldn't be happier with how the Cathay came out. I think for me, I don't like that approach to Marines. I think I enjoy painting Marines in a different way, and that is really good to find out, because it means in the future I know the approach, and knowing the approach I think was my biggest neglect for this video, in that I went in with a very clear idea of the armour colour and a very clear idea that I was going to do them slightly differently to how I normally do, but beyond that I didn't have that sort of clear direction with them, and it meant that there was a lot of wasted hobby time on them. Partly that started with the conversions and the kit bashes at the start, but then also as the painting was going on, there was this sort of just, I don't know, it lacked that rhythm and drive to carry it through and make it a truly satisfying painting project. But I'm sure we've all come up against that, but this is just me trying to analyse what's happened with it. Again, I'm not disappointed at all. I think they look fab. I will really enjoy playing games with them and stuff. But the biggest positive for me is actually bizarrely going, well, this isn't how I want to paint. But sometimes if you haven't done it, you will never know. So I just wanted to say a huge, huge thank you to those of you that support us over on Patreon. Without you, we couldn't do this. It is purely down to you guys that we're able to produce the content here and the extra content you get over on Patreon. So we massively, massively appreciate it. Andy has just finished his huge series on his Golden Demon winning diorama. He did that beautiful Jade Wizard piece. He's coming just back from a job abroad, and we'll be diving into the next one, which I can't wait to see what's coming out there. So go and check it out if you fancy. And if you can't support us on there and you've made it all the way through this video, please hit the thumbs up, make a comment, share the video. It makes a huge difference to the visibility for us. And obviously through that visibility, we get the support that makes this all sustainable. So appreciate every single one of you that does that. So as usual, if you've got any questions about anything I've done in the video, pop them down in the comments and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks for all of your support. Take care. I'll see you next time. If you like any of the models that you've seen in this video, but you don't have the time or the wherewithal to do them yourselves, then consider giving Ben an email at commissions@cultofpaint.com. Maybe he can help you out.